at the skills you need to succeed in the marketing job. For the first one of these, we're talking email marketing with Simon Harper. Email is very often seen as the unglamorous cousin of some of the other digital activity, but hopefully we can change your minds today on some of that stuff and help you see how valuable it can be. So thanks very much for talking to us today, Simon. I suppose it's if we look at email marketing. I mean, nobody who's been looking at social channels on their Twitter feeds or their Facebook feeds or Apple privacy ads, even at the minute, can fail to recognise that there's something coming down the tracks with us in terms of privacy regulation. So, with that in mind, can you tell us why at the minute email marketing is particularly important?
Well, we all know about a year and a half, 18 months. iOS 14 and iOS 15 virtually killed off Facebook ads, although they're getting better. They're trying to work their way around it and AI and all that kind of stuff. New privacy rules are coming in with regards to third-party tracking cookies and all that stuff going away before 2023. Means there's a shift towards zero-party and first-party data that basically you get an interaction from who you're trying to subscribe to and how to reach a direct interaction. And one of the best ways to do that is email marketing. It's an own channel. It's a privileged channel to have. Somebody wants to listen to you and they want to be on your voice, your platform. So that's with ads being less and less relevant at the moment, and certainly going to be becoming harder to get an ROI from. Email marketing is it's never been away, it's certainly coming to the forefront again.
I mean, there's always been value in having your own audiences, but I mean, I suppose the new privacy regulations probably makes it even more valuable than maybe it's been seen as being in the last while.
Very much so. I mean, whenever we've iOS 15, which is what came after privacy tracking within emails, was announced in June 2021 and it hit us in September. But already most ESPs have figured out a privacy focused and respected way to determine who actually is using Apple devices and, more importantly, has the privacy tracking turned on, which means then that we have the technology that a lot of platforms don't currently have to say, okay, these users have privacy tracking enabled, so we can send a different message to them compared to those that don't. So we can send, which is what's great about email, tailored, personalized messages to make sure the right people get the right message and respect their privacy.
Okay. So if we're starting out then, I mean, if for anybody who maybe hasn't been a big user of email, but given all the changes is thinking that it needs to be a bigger part of the mix now, what are some of the things you can do to start building your email list?
Well, one of the first things that people actually forget to do is good old word of mouth. You can't beat it. Constantly tell people that, look, I've started an email list, subscribe, sign up to it. Another one would be putting it in your email footer. So if you're sending out from a professional, business email address, have in your footer somewhere, join my newsletter, have that sort of call to action. If you've got social media profiles, integrate it there. Twitter has a really good way of integrating Review, but you can use Review, which is their email platform, with Zapier to connect to any email platform that you use, whether it be Constant Contact, Drip, MailChimp, Klaviyo, ConvertKit, whatever you want, and making it part of your marketing cycle, making sure that it's advertised everywhere that you possibly have a marketing presence. Let them know, even if it's a pop-up on your website, although pop-ups are fun. I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But having those, or even landing pages where if you're not going to do a pop-up, you have a specific place for somebody to come and sign up and see your value proposition, and that'll be the biggest thing for it. Whenever you start a newsletter, the best thing to do is not just go, right, everybody has a newsletter, I must do it, and panic. Think very carefully about what value you're going to bring to somebody's inbox, because if you don't bring value, they're not going to open it, and have a niche.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing about emails. I mean, I think and I'm sure I'm not alone. I delete probably 80% of the emails I get without reading them. The first job I do every morning is to go through the inbox and say, right, that's the 80% of stuff that I am never going to open, and I'm just going to delete it. And I'm not going to unsubscribe from those newsletters, because that would actually take me longer than just hitting delete.
Although it shouldn't, but yeah, it does.
So the content is important, isn't it?
Massively. I mean, if you don't have engaging content, people aren't going to read it. And it starts with the subject line and then your preview text as well. Preview text is really important, things that sort of people forget about. So if you don't get that initial hook right, first of all, God love you whenever it comes to the content stage. And whenever it comes to the content, you have it's an oversimplification, but two basic types of a skimmable email, which is very easy, bullet pointed down and calls out the action off the other areas, or you have long form emails where you need to make sure your content then really is on point and keeps people engaged. I go for long form.
I know. I noticed that with the series you're doing recently, Simon, and it's really interesting for me actually when I noticed when I'm sort of, if you can, observing your own behaviour in terms of how you consume stuff. So we're dealing in video all the time, right? And we hear all the time, oh, a video can't be any more than 30 seconds long at the minute because we've all got the attention spans of goldfish and we won't read, anything, and it's nonsense, quite a lot of it. I've found myself engaging more with the kind of content that you're doing, the long form stuff, a lot more than necessarily the short form stuff. So sometimes your assumptions about how it needs to be formatted need tested. So would you suggest that people try a mix of those things?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Obviously, when you're starting out, it's difficult because A/B testing is a hard thing to do when you have very little subscribers, but testing is something you should always do throughout your process and trying to figure out what's the best subject lines to send, what's the best message. But the answer for so many things is it depends. So you have to know your audience. So if you're sending a series of campaigns and you can see that, for example, it is long form content and people just aren't engaging, then that's a clear sign that you need to change up your content strategy and either make it short form or just have a really good read to see, am I actually making any sense here? Am I giving people value? Am I answering a problem, solving a need? That type of thing.
Okay. I'm sure many of the marketers who'll be watching this, and I know it's my own personal experience in businesses I've been involved with in the past, will have a target set for them to grow their list to a certain number by a certain period of time. And very often a directive from a senior person or somebody else in the organization can come, why can't we just buy a list?
I want to run and hide whenever I hear that. There are some countries where it is actually legal to do it, but pretty much whenever you're in the EU alone, you can't buy lists. You're not allowed. But buying lists is one of the worst things you can ever do because you don't know the health of that audience and who's in it. So most email service providers will have technology. So MailChimp has a technology called Omnivore, which is designed to use their AI to figure out what emails are real or what aren't, because the likes of your inboxes, so for like Gmail and Outlook and Hotmail and all those other ones, they have their own spam traps. So they set up fake emails that they will put, and they will often get acquired by these list buyers. And they'll then know, so if you buy that list and you start sending emails, you're immediately going to get hit with a zero reputation and you're not getting into people's inboxes and you're going to have a hard time getting out. Buying lists is full of hell. Just don't do it, because you'll have a hard time building your reputation up, and you'll even find using, there's services out there like Zero Bounce that you can use to analyze those lists to see what email addresses are even viable for you to email, and you'll find that it's very few, but also you've earned no right to email those people, and it's going to do you more harm than actually good than starting out organically and building your list from people who actually want to be on it. And as I say, the legal aspects aside, so it is illegal to do it in a lot of places, it's also really poor practice. It's not best practice.
Is there an element of it as well? It's an outcome of the wrong target. So the target shouldn't be how big can we get our list this year. The target should be surely around the engagement and the conversion that you can get from the list. 100%. So is the pushback whenever you're told, I want 10,000 people on our email list by the end of quarter 2, should the response, sometimes that might be possible, but an awful lot of the time should the response be, that's the wrong thing to be targeting here?
Yeah, 100%. Obviously, aside from it's bad practice and it's illegal in a lot of places, the whole point of it is, as you say, it's about having that engaged audience, because one of the best things that you can do whenever you're growing your newsletter is segment it and also have a good audience health and maintain audience health. So one of the things that you will do, you'll certainly look at over a 3 to 6 month period, normally around 6 months, although it's changed a little bit with iOS 15 and MPP, is you'll look at cleaning your list. So you'll maybe have people that sign up at month 0, but actually they've been very inactive for those 6 months and they're doing more harm than good being on your list. So you would either look at then 6 months down the line doing a re-engagement strategy or removing them completely. So numbers aren't necessarily the big metric. I would rather have 100 engaged users than 100 out of 100 engaged users than 100 out of 10,000, because my list is going to be harmed massively by that in terms of how much of that is actually reaching people's inboxes. Because if you grow a really large list but it's inactive, that actually affects your email deliverability and can hurt whether your email actually ends up in an inbox or in the spam.
Okay. So going back to then thinking about people are going trying to build their lists. How important is the offer? You mentioned asking people to subscribe and all, which is great. How important is the offer in the success of your ability to grow your list?
Huge. I mean, one of the things I cry about whenever I say it is, here's our newsletter, subscribe now. Why? You're giving me no reason to subscribe.
Because I need more emails, yeah.
Or even e-commerce brands at the minute, which is a joke. Whenever I see, for example, it's about how much we value you as a user. So if you say, for example, we'll offer you 5% off. Nowadays, 5% off your first order won't even cover shipping. It's just not good enough now. So whenever you're looking at the offer, you have to look at your audience and look at other strategies in other areas of your business. So if you have the margins, fine, but you're looking at a 15 to 25% discount in your first order to try and get that in.
Yeah. And then will your margins sustain that?
Yes.
Or,
And then whenever you're looking at, if you're not looking at ecom and you're looking at other value propositions, it's in terms of what problem can I solve for that person, and can I articulate that clearly? So for example, I'm going to solve all your SEO needs with regards to organic SEO, top tips that you can actually apply every Friday. That's a great call to action to sign up.
Well, this leads me on to the next question, I suppose. And I mean, we talked about this before. And it's the old B2B versus B2C thing, can you answer, and I'm interested to know, can you answer this question without saying it depends? So, is it easier for direct-to-consumer ecom brands who are able to offer the 15-20% discount, free shipping, whatever, to build their list than a B2B business where perhaps the sales, the product's a bit drier and a bit more boring?
Yeah. Well, you know what I'm going to say.
It depends.
But no, yes, it depends, but also there's a lot of crossover. So whenever you're doing B2B, it's more along what your sort of content and your offer would be around the product education. So whenever a new product launches, how it would actually solve that problem for that client, that business, but also a follow-up email, a follow-up series of how, right, you've got our product, here's how you use it, or here's best practices to get even more value out of it for your business. B2B emails tend to be around more education than B2C. B2C, we all know them, are abandoned cart emails, or you've just signed up, if you buy another one within the next 10 days, we'll give you another 20% off. Sadly, there's a lot of a race to the bottom with that, and it is starting to change, which is good, particularly because brands can't afford to just keep discounting down everything. But B2B is certainly a more difficult market traditionally, but the stats that we have, and again, it depends where you get your stats from and what you've done, but there's not a massive difference between engagement in a B2B and a B2C audience. It's just down to how good your email marketer is, or how good your content is, what your product
offering is. It's back to the old B2B challenge in that it's harder to measure the conversion, because if somebody jumps on and buys another t-shirt and uses the discount code, that email worked. Yeah. Whereas on a B2B, we might be in a 6-month sales cycle, and it might be a contributory factor to you getting the sale in 6 months, but really it's very hard.
Yeah, particularly if they're just educational emails and there is no call to buy. You're just providing value in that, as you say, building up that knowledge of that product and eventually maybe leading to the sale. Although, depending on what you use with UTM links and other stuff, you can potentially track that, but it's it depends. It depends.
Okay. Landing pages then. So you mentioned them earlier. So how can you use landing pages as part of your list building campaigns, and what sort of platforms can you use, or would you suggest people use to build them?
Well, landing pages are great. They're one of the best ways to have a dedicated capture for that email address and to sell that newsletter, that sign up. So you've got services like Unbounce, Lead Pages, Card. Most ESPs, the likes of MailChimp, ConvertKit, they all offer their own landing pages as well with different features. Okay. But where you should always primarily start is if you have your own website. You should be creating a landing page on there. You own it. The SEO, you need to keep that. You shouldn't be giving it away to another platform. It just depends on what your budget is, what your technical knowledge is, and where you can go with. So
I know I use Lead Pages myself, and I know they have a WordPress plugin that works really well, actually, because it means I don't have to annoy a developer when I want a new page built. I can build one, connect it up to my Lead Pages account and plug it in. I mean, from an SEO or technical perspective, is there any problem with doing that?
Again, it depends what services you use. So from, like, for example, if Card and even ConvertKit, they allow you to control SEO aspects of the landing pages, but to get the sort of the maximum impact, you should always try and use it on your own website, unless the likes of Lead Pages, which has different integrations with different things, you can pull across everything, but you want people to be on your website, not somebody else's, ideally.
Well, we've it's a bit of an aside, but we've started to use Lead Pages less, actually, because we used the Elementor.
Elementor
builder as largely the builder for the new Blue Sky video marketing website that we did. And their sort of drag and drop content blocks is pretty similar to what Lead Pages does anyway.
Yeah, no code.
And it allows us to build it on our own site. We were using Lead Pages because it was more difficult to do on our own site.
Right. Okay.
Whereas now it's with Elementor, it's become a lot easier to do. So would you suggest for us that we should continue to do that as that sort of non-menu page?
Yeah, I mean, you have to do what works for you, and I know Elementor can integrate with other ESPs as well, and so I know you can do things with their sign-up forms like add tags, so you can easily and quickly group and segment your audiences within your ESP, so you can target them later on. So you know, you kind of have to do what works for you. There's all these services offer different things, but the one thing that you need to be consistent about, no matter what you use, is that landing page has to clearly convey your message, your value proposition, and what people are exactly going to get and expect from your newsletter list.
Okay. Then you've mentioned segmenting a few times. So when should you start segmenting your list?
As soon as you possibly can.
Okay.
Like, honestly, I mean, you should never list bomb, which is what we call it, when you hit your entire list. You really shouldn't. Now,
you shouldn't. So you shouldn't send an email to your entire list.
No. You could send.
Well, see, I remember when you said this to me before. Yeah. This was a shock to me.
You just shouldn't do it. Now, you can send, in theory, different versions of a campaign to your entire list. That's fine, because again, you're looking at why you've segmented them, your own internal organization, why you've done it. But you know, there's always going to be a segment of most people's lists that aren't engaged. They're not opening. So why would you spend all that time and effort sending that email out to those people on a regular basis and further hurting your deliverability reputation? Whenever, for example, a better campaign to send them would be a re-engagement campaign to say, look, we haven't seen you active in a while. Would you like to click on this link to reactivate, re-engage? Let us know you're still out there. Okay. But unless there's a major site-wide announcement, and then, yes, of course, fair enough. Over shutting down, you might want to email your whole list, but still don't expect the ones that never open it to actually see it. Okay. Moving on then to the automated email sequences, right? I was already terrified when I first encountered automated email sequences, and I look at some of the preset journeys in MailChimp that they have, which in theory should make it less terrifying, but in reality, I must have just closed the laptop down and run away about 7 times before I eventually got brave enough to say, no, I'm going to actually devote some time here to try and figure out what the hell's going on. Yeah. How many steps would you recommend, and this is another it depends answer, I can feel it coming, in a welcome email sequence? It depends. It does, but I mean, what it depends on is who your target audience is and what you're trying to achieve. So your welcome emails can be one email. They can be, or they can be a series of emails. Okay. It's very rare that there should be one email unless you're me and you're lazy and you don't practice what you preach. But your first welcome email that you send in general, no matter what industry you're in, is going to get the most opens, the most clicks, the most interaction, people spending reading time, that kind of stuff. So why not make sure that message is entirely on point? And that's why it's a really good time to create an email series, because you know that they're going to read that first email pretty much for sure. So you then want to accelerate them off
Yeah.
to where you want them to go within the series, and that's where you can use automation. So if they didn't read the first email in the series, then they now go into this automation.
Okay.
Or if they did read it, they continue on down the current flow.
Yeah.
And the biggest mistake I see around email automations, and particularly the welcome series, is that they're evergreen. So people will often do it and then just forget it and just set it. Whereas you're like, well, hold on a second. There's Valentine's Day, there's St. Patrick's Day, there's Easter, there's Halloween, there's Christmas, there's all of these seasonal times. Why don't you mention to your customers events you may be doing, products you may be selling, events you may be attending, or even milestones in your business? People just forget all of this and just leave it. Whereas you don't know at what point people will be joining your newsletter in the financial year, and or more importantly, your financial year and what your business is doing that year. So it's important to keep that evergreen, because people just, I look at an automation series when I'm doing account audits and just say, you've not edited that in like months.
Yeah. No, and it was one of the challenges for me actually whenever we first set it up when myself and Michael were working on our first automated email sequence, which was the welcome sequence. It was like, okay, well, if we want to set this up and forget it and maybe check back on it every couple of months and make sure it's working, but if we want to set it up and forget it, we can't. We've got to make sure that we're directing people to things where we know on the website where we know there'll be new content added, but we don't know what it is because we don't know when the person is going to get the email.
I think if you're struggling to keep something evergreen and maybe your resources are tied and you want to have something that's generic enough where you know the content that they're linking to will eventually change or be more dynamic, you can almost think of your welcome email as like the link tree of email. Yeah. So that would be a place where you know, like, these core URLs, so your social media channels, they're not going to change. So you have them in there. Core areas in your website, if you know they're not going to change, but the content will, so obviously take them to your news page, your blog page, your category pages, whatever, then that's fine. But you can definitely, it just depends.
What I found in setting up the email sequence is actually it promoted better behaviour in relation to email marketing, because it made us actually think a little bit more about the kind of content that we should be sending people. Yeah. Because we knew we were trying to set up this automated sequence, it was okay. Because I was as guilty as I'm sure most people are of thinking, oh shit, I haven't sent an email this month. Yeah. Right, so I'd jump on the MailChimp, fire a campaign together, just start writing and dragging content blocks, and then just go schedule send. Time warp sounds good. That'll be optimized. It'll definitely convert. Send it out, and then tumbleweeds. Yeah. The automated sequences made me think a lot more about what we needed to be sending people. So in our email sequence, it was like, what do people care about? We've done a few different offers that we're testing at the minute: free guide to YouTube advertising, surveys about how people are using video and how they see that changing over the next 12 months. And then we're thinking, whenever people have subscribed to that list and accepted, given us permission to annoy them in their email inbox, then what's going to help us build trust with them? So it was like, okay, well, if we can showcase our previous work, if we can introduce them to members of the team, if we can, which hopefully won't change too often, if we can outline some of the services that we do that maybe they don't associate with us. Okay. And it's a lot more thought than I'd ever given it before, just by virtue of looking at the sequences. Was that a sort of almost a side benefit of maybe thinking about the automated sequences?
Yeah, I mean, like it's like anything. We want to do as little work as possible these days, but achieve maximum results. And sometimes it's one of those things where it's like, you get what you put in. So the more work you put in to anything, the more, in theory, you should get more out of it. But I mean, the great thing about the automation series is now is that they can accelerate you on to other places in the business, or you can even say, look, it's been 90 days since we've sent this last email and they didn't click on it. So we're actually going to start them in another series. And as you say, if you forget to send out regular emails and you know you have automations running in the background, that's good, because people often notice, probably notice completely more often, that when you're not there rather than you are there. So if you're sending out an email every week, that's fine. But it's whenever you accidentally miss that one, people all of a sudden are like, oh, what? I didn't get that. So the biggest thing about emailing, as you said, what came out of that for me was consistency. Yeah. So if you're going to say, I'm going to email you once a week on a Monday, email them once a week on a Monday. Or if it's once a month, that's fine. But again, that's working within your parameters and what you can cope with. So like I send out 3 emails a week, which most people think is insane. And it's a challenge, but it's working so far. But most people will be sending out emails maybe once every 2 weeks, once a month, unless you're an e-commerce brand. In which case, as you say, you look in your promotions tab and go, I'll look at that in a few days. So it's just, again, it depends. But the biggest thing of it is consistency and being consistent and present.
Okay, if we focus a little bit now on specific content, so is writing subject lines the hardest thing in the world to do?
No, it's one of them. I mean, that's the first thing that they see, and then the second thing that they see, particularly if you're using an app, is the preview text underneath. And sometimes the preview text is more important. So, for example, in my email newsletters, they're edition numbered, so my subject line never changes apart from the number. So my preview text is the most important thing. Okay. But your subject line, I mean, like there's best practices. You need to make it parsable. So most ASPs will have merge tags where you can include people's names or their business names or whatever in it, so that personalizes a little bit more. You need to be very careful about using emojis. You can use them; they're lots of fun. They're in there, and keeping it short, descriptive, and not using too much punctuation. So you're maybe looking at 40 to 60 characters for your subject line, 6 to 9 words. Not too many punctuations, or your full stops, your commas, your exclamation marks, and not being, we see lots of things like that, massive Black Friday sale now. If you send that, like so many other people sending it, so be more descriptive about, what your Black Friday sale is, and then your preview line is that great place to then fully expand that out.
Is there I'm fairly convinced there is, but is there a ploy that people use now of the, oops, we made a mistake? Right, when because everybody loves the idea that they're about to watch a car crash.
Yeah,
so
it happens rarely, but it has been more prominent recently. It happens with very little success.
Well, my inbox would say that either it's a deliberate ploy or people who are sending email campaigns make a lot of mistakes.
Yeah, well, I mean, I made one last week, but one of the actually, going back very briefly to one of your B2B ones, one of the best subject lines actually is whenever you're talking about, oops, we made a mistake emails, it's, a letter from the CEO. Those subject lines in B2B emails pretty much grab people's attention, but like there's, so...
P&O sent one of them last week.
I'm not going to go there. Oh, dear. I make, for example, MailChimp have a built-in subject line checker where they'll subject check all this different criteria to see you meeting best practices. Omnisend has a free tool, you don't even have to have an account, where you can stick in your subject line that you think you were going to send for your campaign, and they'll say out of 100 what you get and how you can change it and adapt it. And then there's a brilliant Chrome plugin you can get, it's free, called Email Characters, from an awesome email marketer called Naomi West, and she runs Slow Emails, and you can plug this in and basically put the subject line into this tool, and it'll tell you where your preview text is going to get clipped and in what email provider, what app you're using, or if your subject line is too long, an improvement. So yes, it's hard, but you can get better at it, and there's tools out there to help you get better at it. But as I said at the start, there are certain best practices that if you follow, you'll be on your way to getting there. And of course, A/B test.
Going into the content of the email, I didn't warn you about this one, I'm going to ask you it anyway.
Okay.
Plain text email campaigns. Because I remember I was down the first time. Well, it wasn't the first time, but I remember listening. I remember listening to Val Geisler down at Learn Inbound actually in 2019, and she devoted quite a bit of her presentation at the time. I don't know whether she did or whether it's just occurred, whether it just stuck in my head that she did, talking about using plain text emails to get better returns from your email campaigns. Is that a thing? Does that work?
In general, well, I mean, it depends on the ESP that you use, because they'll have their own internal data of what performs better on their network. But in general, plain text emails are brilliant. They're great. They are small in file size, which means Gmail doesn't clip them, so you actually get to see the full email. They're quick and they're easy to read. They're normally skimmable, and for people with accessibility issues, they're much easier to read, particularly because most people dump images into their emails and don't add alt text or title text or anything like that, and it's just a nightmare because then people can't see the emails. And often e-commerce brands will have an entire email that is just a picture, and if that doesn't load or is blocked, which a lot of apps do, you're screwed. So plain text emails generally will convert a lot higher. I mean, that's why they're there as well. And there's most ASPs, again, MailChimp offers you the option of sending out a plain text version off each email ConvertKit. All the other ones do as well. Okay. And I always have that set up that people can choose to have a plain text version of my email. But most of my emails, apart from maybe my logo, won't have images on that unless I'm doing a product review. It's just, it's conversational. It's a nice way to have things rather than these big images all the time. There's a time and a place for them, but if you're doing it, it's normally a single column email, and it's one.
Does that would it potentially work? I mean, I'm just thinking out loud here actually about how we could maybe change our welcome sequence. Could it potentially work as that initial welcome email because it appears more personal?
Initial welcome emails are brilliant. They're superb. They're a great way to do things, and particularly if you're keeping it short and sweet and to the point. It's very easy then for people to skim it and go, right, this is the key value that I'm bringing out of it. I'm going to go off and do what they want me to do.
Okay. I'm conscious of our time here, and people are probably watching this on their lunch breaks. So finish off. We've got to the last question, just bang on time. If someone's starting from scratch or from a very small email list or has a big desire to try and massively increase their own audience, given the privacy regs that we talked about at the start, what would you say are some of the best metrics they should have for the next 100 days?
Next 100 days? Well, with iOS 15, unless you're on an ESP that can track opens accurately, opens are a tough one. So opens have obviously been considered a vanity metric for a long time, and there's most of the big ESPs have figured out how to determine whether it's Apple opening an email or a real human. So for the majority of people, particularly if you're using some of the other services like MailChimp and stuff, you're maybe looking clicks being the biggest thing. It's the one metric we know across the board. If people are clicking on things, then they're engaging. Some email service providers have read times of how long people are actually reading them, but your biggest things will be clicks for me. That is the metric that you really, really, really want to have, or people then that go back and click again, because that's the other thing, or open multiple times. Because normally if somebody opens multiple times, then you're fairly certain at least that if your ESP doesn't know that it's an Apple MPP open, if they've opened it 3 or 4 times, normally a human has at least opened it then. Okay. And then you're looking at times a day. So whenever your list is growing, you don't have enough people to A/B test. So you're looking at what are your optimal opening times, so you can then learn to send your email at the right time to get even higher engagement statistics. Because over the 100 days, you'll probably want to send. You need to send very carefully. If you're starting from scratch, so say for example you don't have a small email audience, you are starting from scratch, you have to do what we call warming your audience. Because if you start sending out emails repeatedly all the time, particularly to your entire list, because maybe it is really small, you're going to have deliverability issues. So you want to have a content plan in place and keep KPIs for yourselves of where you maybe want people to go to in your email. So plan out your content ahead in that first 100 days. Look at seasonal topics that are going on, so that if you don't necessarily have the data yet that you want in your ESP, you at least have it in your own performance and business metrics. Because again, it depends what you have. If you're an e-commerce brand, that can be integrated into your ESP anyway, so you can see product sales, you can see what are popular products, and then you can adjust content and things to go out there. So, but again, that comes down to engagement. So it's that click, what's enticing people to go in. Another thing to look at would be your content. So if people are not clicking, and maybe the CTA is down at the bottom, move the CTA to the top, move it to the middle, look at having multiple CTAs. There's so much that you can have in there to look at, but the one that I have to say clearly is forget about opens. They're not as important at all anymore as what some people still hold on to. It is that for now, consistently across the board is a click. One of the great things to do that people are doing now is getting a short little feedback, whether it be 3 columns and 3 emojis. It's like rate my email. And if you can get somebody to click that, then not only do you get a bit of data back of how people thought your email was, but you know a human has clicked it.
Okay.
So there's nice wee things around it, but you can look at other things as well, like your own internal metrics you can maybe track the URL that people are on the landing page to see if people are going to it, but people aren't actually signing up, in which case your value proposition on your landing page is off before people even get to the email stage. Okay. But certainly in the first 100 days from a new list, forget the opens and focus on the clicks and the send time. That's what we call send time optimization. When do we send it?
Okay. I mean, it sounds like from the conversation we've had, it's largely similar to a lot of marketing activity where the platform you're using is important, but the content and the time you spend on the creative element of it is the thing that will ultimately determine whether you have success with it or not.
100%. And it's because I mean, platforms do play a large part, and that's something I maybe didn't touch on or should have done. So I'm running an experiment at the minute with LinkedIn newsletters. So I've done, I think it's like 5 or 6 newsletters in the last 12, 14 weeks.
Okay.
And I've gone from 0 on there, and it's a closed platform, so you can read them if you're not a LinkedIn member, but you can't interact or engage with them or sign up. You have to be on LinkedIn. But my newsletter growth is 4 times that of my own ESP,
right,
which I use. I'm not going to name who they are, but I've been at that hard for 8 months, whereas I've got a 4x growth on LinkedIn, which is closed. So it's about looking where your audience is when you're starting your newsletter as well, to try and figure out where people are going to engage with that content and listen in. But again, just to reiterate, when you are first starting out, you need to plan. You should be planning every email before you write it anyway, but at the start, you really need to plan, because if you're just doing something ad hoc, you're not going to have many engagement metrics to look at anyway.
Okay, that's great, Simon.
Brilliant.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks very much to everybody who joined us there for our first Top Tips series. We'll be back with another one later on in probably April, May time. We're back tomorrow evening for the next hour-long episode of our Future Marketing Live series, where we've got Tim Monroe and Gillian McKee talking to us about purpose-driven marketing, and that's live from 6 tomorrow evening. So thanks very much for joining us this lunchtime. I hope you found that useful, and good luck with your email marketing efforts.